Hey everybody, and welcome to a new video. Are you always looking for ways to improve your image quality? Or do you find that your photos just look noisy, lack clarity, and don't look sharp? In this video, I'm going to show you how to improve your image quality without getting new gear. That's right, by just using a technique called ETTR, or exposed to the right. So before I can explain this technique, it's important to understand why it would or wouldn't work. And to do that, we need to understand how exposure affects the noise performance of your camera. That's because noisy images lack clarity, lack dynamic range, and don't look as sharp. There are different types of noise in digital photography. Color noise is the appearance of colored specks in your photo, often worse in dark, underexposed areas. Read noise is noise from the circuits on your sensor, like amplifiers and capacitors, often seen when you raise dark exposures a lot in processing. Both of these are being managed better by modern cameras because they can be fixed with technology improvements. But the worst noise in photography mostly comes from shot noise, caused by the fact that light comes in small packets that can vary, like the number of raindrops in glasses left outside, which won't exactly be the same. And this noise can't be eliminated with sensor technology. The fix? More raindrops or photons. The more of them you can capture, the less the variances between them. So how do you capture more photons onto a sensor? Those of you versed in the exposure triangle might say that shutter speed, aperture, and ISO are the ways to get more photons. But actually, it's just the first two. Longer shutter speeds increase the amount of photons collected by having them collected over a longer period of time, as does a wider aperture by having a larger hole through which they can enter. But ISO is only electronic gain to make your image brighter. It's not capturing more photons nor multiplying them. It can boost the electronic signal created, but shot noise is improved with real photons. So why do brighter photos with more light collected have less noise? It's because while noise goes up with the amount of light, it doesn't do so proportionately. While the amount of light captured over time is linear, noise rises at the square root of the amount of light. So the more light you can get on your sensor, the better the signal-to-noise ratio, which is what improves your image quality. So this can be seen between two images where one image has had a longer shutter speed, like this one, compared to this one. Note that the one with 4 times the shutter speed length is cleaner. Note that the ISO, or electronic gain, needed to go up to get the image brightness the same. But not only when we compare images can we see where more light leads to less noise, we can see it in different parts of the same image. In this photo, shot in quite low light where I needed to raise the ISO to 12,800 to get it a decent brightness, look how the darker parts of the image are noisy and the brighter parts are quite clean even in the same photo. That's because this part of the sensor had more light, more photons projected onto it. The last thing we need to understand is how exposure works in a camera. Most cameras are designed to expose a photo to middle gray, which can often have a histogram that has most of its data around the middle. This is 18% gray, or a gray that reflects 18% of light. If you don't know how a histogram works, check out my video on that right here, but make sure you come back. From what we've seen already, the brighter an image is, or even the brighter parts of an image are, the less noise it has. So this part of a photo, the darker parts, has the most noise. The middle part, made up of the midtones, has a medium amount of noise, and the right-hand side, the brightest parts, has the least noise. So when we're taking a photo, moving a photo exposure up the histogram to the right will move the main parts of the exposure out of the darkest parts of the histogram, so our shadows are cleaner, and the middle part from the midtones farther to the right on the histogram to get even, again, cleaner. That is where the name ETTR, or exposed to the right, comes from. We intentionally expose the photo brighter, to the right on the histogram, to improve image quality by getting more photons onto our sensor. This gives us a better signal-to-noise ratio, less noisy images, and better dynamic range and clarity. But our image is now too bright compared to the scene we were trying to capture. So part of the ETTR technique is to also lower the brightness in post-processing, bringing it back to what you saw when you took the photo. But you may be saying, but if you darken the image in processing and move the histogram back to the left as the image gets darker, Aren't you bringing that noise back? That is the best part. When you captured the brighter image, you froze the noise profile of that photo, so when you darken it again, it stays at where you captured it. Is there a but? Yes, there is. It's that when you expose brighter, that is, move the histogram to the right, any bright whites risk getting clipped, that is, made pure white. Knowing how to spot clipping on your histogram, that would be touching on the right-hand side, or turning on blinkies, that is, highlight alerts, which will blink when blown out, are great ideas. So the proper definition of ETTR is the following. ETTR is to improve image quality by increasing the brightness of your photo by moving the histogram to the right without touching the right-hand side and without clipping any color information. By the way, follow me on Facebook and Instagram, where I almost always include a photo tip with every post, and sign up for my email list, and you can download my guide for shooting backlit for free. Link below. So how does one use ETTR in real life? First, frame the shot as you usually would. Properly expose the photo as a starting point, as you usually would as well. Have a look at the histogram to see if there's any space to the right where you could brighten the image without hitting the right-hand side. On a mirrorless camera, if your histogram isn't visible on your back LCD screen, for many brands, hitting the info or display button several times will make it show up. Then open the aperture with a lower f number or lengthen the shutter speed, both sources of real photons, until the histogram moves as far right as you can, but not touching the right-hand side. If you're using a semi-automatic mode like shutter or aperture priority, use positive exposure compensation to move the histogram to the right. After you've taken your shot, use post-processing software to lower the exposure. You can move the exposure slider to the left and do the rest of the processing as you usually would. Does this work? Let's take two photos. One where I expose the photo properly, and a second where I use the ETTR technique. I then lowered the exposure in processing. If you compare the two, you can see that the ETTR image is cleaner. These areas in the smoother, featureless background are where you'll often see the most difference. Even if the scene is quite dark, you can do this. If you look at these two images of a giraffe-necked antelope I took in Kenya, I exposed one to properly show the scene as it looked. It was really dark after sunset, and I used ETTR to raise the brightness using a lower shutter speed in a second image. See how the brighter image is a lot cleaner even if shot at the same ISO. A few more bits of advice. Are there times when you should not use ETTR? My experience is that photos, especially dark ones with tiny bright highlights, aren't a good time to use ETTR. That's because the bright highlights are very difficult to see on the histogram if they only make up a small part of your photo, and they're very prone to being clipped if you move the exposure right. Also, this technique is best used while shooting in RAW for a couple of reasons. One, your histogram may not be perfectly accurate, and two, RAW images have more room if you happen to clip your highlights and can more easily recover them. Will all of this make you a better photographer? Not really. That comes from amazing compositions, great scenes, and great storytelling. But it will allow you to bring home your best quality images and maybe salvage photo opportunities that maybe you used to think weren't worth shooting. If you found this video deserving, give it a like so YouTube will share it with even more photographers. And I hope that you can use these tips the next time you go out to get your own unique and amazing photos. I know you can do it.